That's the secret that I don't really know. I don't know. Let's see. And that has to be okay. And that's the joy of it.
It is.
The not knowing is the joy of it.
All of that work should lead to you going, I don't know, we'll see. And so that's the paradox, is like, I know so much and I know enough to know I don't know. Flow. All right, here we go. Thank you, Terry Martin, for being a guest on episode 10 of the podcast. I am so excited to have you here and just talk like we always do.
Right.
And
we talk a lot.
We do. We talk a lot. We definitely nerd out about acting,
yes.
And no better place to do it than on an acting podcast. So
Good.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my great pleasure.
So I can introduce the audience a little bit to how we met, which was through one of the guests on the podcast, Ashton Lewis. I don't know if you know that, but yeah, when I was teaching him, just for a short period, he had mentioned you, mm-hmm. and he was like, "You really got to meet Terry. Like you're gonna love Terry, and he's great." And a lot of the things that I had learned about Sanford Meisner and his principles of acting, he said, "You just got to meet Terry." And so I was like, "Well, I would love to meet Terry." And then we met, and we clicked immediately. Yeah. And then it just so happened that we really needed an actor that filled this part for this film, which was the judge in this movie, Wayward Ken, which we have coming out soon. And that was just an added amazing bonus that you were able to do that, and the timing worked out. So we've worked together in a few capacities, but we're just friends.
Exactly.
And it's been so great to get to know you and reconnect with you all the time on something that we both love, which is acting.
Well, I love the fact that when I reach out and say you want to have coffee, you're one of the few people that goes, "Yeah, when?"
Yeah.
Most people are like, "Well, I'm busy through, the entire year," but you always make time to be a friend and chat, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, the feeling is mutual.
Yeah.
I'm so glad for the time that you have, because I know you're very busy and you're doing so many things, but it's really nice that we can carve out a little time to just hang.
Well, it was very interesting that the time that you reached out and we connected and our typical thing is meeting for coffee, and we just sit and drink coffee and talk. But I had pretty much just recently made a transition from running a professional theater company, where I was teaching ongoing classes as well as running the theater company, into a full-time education position at an independent school here in Dallas. And so it was a transition time for me, and I was feeling at the time sort of suddenly disconnected from the art that I had been making, because I was at the school much more of an administrative role. So it just was very serendipitous that we connected, and suddenly there was this colleague that understood the passion and understood what I was talking about, which in this town, frankly, has been really rare. When I first came here and had the opportunity to run the theater, I knew immediately that I wanted to teach, and I wanted to teach the Meisner technique, because while there were some people in town, and I don't mean this disparaging in any way at all, I'm supportive of anybody who is sharing the craft with people and giving them an opportunity to work out and improve themselves. But the Meisner name was being thrown around, and it really wasn't what I understood the technique to be, having studied it for such a long time in New York. And so I was determined to make sure that I was creating an opportunity for myself, and thus for other artists in town, to really get a place where they could get their hand around the fullness of the work.
Yeah, and what I found too in New York and here and just all over is this funny kind of thing, and I know you can speak to this in a major way, which I'm excited to hear about, which is there's, obviously in a commercial thing, which is like an exchange of goods and services. If you're even a teacher, there's a service and someone's paying for that service and spending time and all of that. There's this inherent competition. And you're like, okay, I get that, but art is not a competition.
Right.
And every year there's awards and there's all these things, and it is kind of like, well, it's gamified in a way. It's like who's better, who's worse, and we all have. And I'm no stranger to having fun discussions about, well, I think I like that performance better. I've been doing that my whole life, but there is something inherently, I don't know. I found there's such camaraderie and there's such goodness in really supporting one another in this art form, and whatever the capacity may be, whether it's two teachers like ourselves teaching people, or it's two directors, or it's actors, directors, it doesn't matter. For me, I'm like, there's so many obstacles out there, not only internal, but especially external in this industry of acting. Why would we not talk more about it and get together and even debate or exchange ideas if we disagree? I just feel like that sharpens us so much. And it was so refreshing to be able to sit down with someone who had so much experience and was staying true to probably because I know you, what I know was kind of an inception of passion for acting so long ago, and you haven't lost that. It feels like it's only intensified over the years. So what was that first moment that struck, whether it was a first acting introduction, or what was it when you think about it?
The first moment for me that theater and acting had any kind of meaning at all was, and having grown up in a really small town in South Alabama, the fact that these opportunities even showed up in my life at all are really quite remarkable. But the high school at the time, that I was in, like the 6th grade, I believe, did a production of Our Town. And they brought it to the elementary school for us. And I wasn't sure what I was seeing, but it was life-changing for me. Being a young boy in an Alabama town that had no desire to play football or shoot animals, finding this thing that had meaning just put me on a path of curiosity that never stopped. Of course, I had no concept that a career could happen from that at that time, but that's when it started. I ended up, because of some strange natural talent, working in the musical theater, and most of my big roles once I got to college were in musicals. I was fortunate enough to do summer stock, and I was getting cast in leads in musicals, and I was doing that. And at summer stock, you're a college student who is coming in, and then you're working with professionals who they've brought in from New York as well. And I remember very distinctly this older actor. Not old like I am, but was 30s compared to 22, said to me, "You're really good, and when you get to New York, you're going to work. But unless you want to be a 35-year-old chorus boy, you need to learn how to act." And it was incredibly sobering for me to realize that, there was more I needed to do. As grateful as I was for what was being the opportunities that I was having, it just sparked in me a desire to find more. And when I moved to New York, which was right after that, I began to look for a class, because this guy also told me, and I still tell students this all the time, find yourself in a class with actors who are working, because you're never going to get better if you're not working with people who are better than you. And for some reason I use sports metaphors a lot in my teaching, but it's like you're never going to be a better tennis player if you're only playing with people who are not as good as you. So that stuck with me. So I went looking for a class. And I just started listening to people talk about the classes that they were in and asking questions. And I heard a friend of a friend at a party talking about this class that she was in. Some of the people that were working actors who were in that class, and the type of work that they were doing. And it just really sparked my imagination, and I said, I want to know more about that. Of course, I had no idea that it was Meisner. I had not even heard of Meisner at the time. We studied a little bit of Stanislavski and Strasberg in college, but we didn't focus really on any kind of technique at all. So it was all new to me. And I found myself in this class, and it just spoke to me. Strangely enough, as much as I still love musicals, I kind of never went back to musicals. You know, it wasn't enough anymore. I was hungry for more.
In that first class, what was, if you can think of it, what was one of the first light bulb moments for you that you went, oh, I'm starting to get what maybe that older actor had told me about learning how to act?
I think the first light bulb that went off for me was realizing that it wasn't just that it just didn't happen. That there was and required of me an intentionality of finding the moment, whether it was the intentional listening, the intentional fascination of the other person and learning how to really pay attention to all of that. I think the light bulb for me was realizing this is not me going on stage, crossing my fingers and hoping some inspiration is going to show up. This is me learning how to take control of this process and intentionally turning it into something that I'm doing, you know? And I think I understood that before I even completely understood Sandy Meisner's The Reality of Doing Foundation. And I think I understood just the intentional attention that this work required. And it just made me feel in control.
Instead of hoping for a miracle,
yeah,
you were like, I can now create the effect I'm looking for.
I know what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm beginning to learn to know what to do.
Do you think you had almost like a preternatural instinct for it, one, because of how you were set up as a person? Or do you think it was something about Mr. Meisner's understanding of life and trying to codify that in some way, that it's based in life principles, and that you knew something about life? Obviously, you were alive for a number of years.
Right.
What do you think it was?
Well, I don't know. Adam. That's a really good question. I mean, the class that I originally wanted to be in was a class with a teacher named Wynn Handman, who was a scene study teacher. And he was a protege of Sandy's. And he was the artistic director of the American Place Theater, which at that time was the only not-for-profit theater in the Broadway area. Wynn brought Sam Shepard up from the East Village, and a lot of these avant-garde, really edgy playwrights that were just beginning to sort of make a name from themselves in the 70s. He was the one that really brought them mainstream. So I auditioned for his class to get in that class, and I didn't make it, and I was devastated. But he told me, I share a studio space, the space that we're in. I share a studio space with this other teacher named Fred Karaman. And he teaches more of a beginning basics class. You get in Freddie's class, and when Freddie says you're ready, you can come right to my class. So I was devastated, to be rejected for this thing that I wanted. And but I went to Freddie's class, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because suddenly we were working on the basics, I think a problem with so many actors, especially if they're fortunate enough to have any kind of success, whether it's because of natural talent or being in the right place at the right time or any of that, is that they think they've got it. They think if I just keep doing this, then I'll be successful. And I realized very early, and maybe it has to do with who I am as a spirit and a person, that I always have been a growth-minded person. But I realized very quickly, I wanted to be better. I wanted to be as good as I could be. And I see so many actors who don't take class and they don't study and they don't practice, and then they're resentful and mad when they're not getting roles. And it's like, are you working on your craft? You know, you can't expect to be successful at a craft as difficult as acting is. And we could talk a lot about why people don't think it's difficult. And I know that you and I both agree and understand that it is, that you have to work on it. You have to practice. You're never done. I've seen the look in students' eyes when I say to them, you're never done. The work is never done. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no.
My teacher used to say, there's no such thing as arriving.
Right.
It's sort of the same thing. It's like, as soon as you think you've arrived, you're dead in the water. And he would try to prevent people from getting to that point where they think, I'm good. I've got it.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, you have a foundation, you have things that you take the right road that'll lead to good acting. But if you had 20 years to work on a part, after year 20, after the last performance, you're probably going to leave with this mindset there's other things I could have discovered. I didn't get it all. And that's really the nature of it.
I have been teaching I started teaching in 1990. So I've been teaching I'm an actor, so I'm horrible at math. I don't know how many years that is, but I've been teaching for a really long time.
This is your 35th year.
35th year, okay, 35. So I've been teaching for 35 years and acting for much longer than that. And even when I act now, I know that I'm gonna make mistakes and I'm not gonna get it right. And it's about continuing to do the work and continuing to figure it out. You know, the best of the best have bad days. You know? So what we want to do as craftsmen is to find a way to be hungry for that process. You know, and not be disappointed when it doesn't go well. Okay, so do it again.
You know, I used to look at certain actors and they would be on a short list for me of, they can kind of do no wrong. They're the best ones I've ever seen or what have you. And I had a teacher one time say, well, you've never seen the takes that ended up on the cutting room floor. So why don't you just stop idolizing them? They're just people and they also make mistakes. And I think the ones that are the actors that are more aware of not their infallibility, but their humanity and the fact that they cannot always get it right. Usually, ironically, they're probably more consistent because they are adhering to the principles of being vulnerable in the moment.
Right.
And saying, I don't really know how it's going to go.
Boy, that's the secret. That I don't really know. I don't know. Let's see. And that has to be okay. You know, and that's the joy of it.
It is.
The not knowing is the joy of it.
It really is. It's so fun. And it's ironic, I think, because maybe it's a paradox for some. It's like the more I study something, the more I know, right? that makes sense. But in acting, it's you have to study something. You have to learn the craft. You have to learn something about yourself, access your instincts and your imagination, and let your emotions out, and all of those things have a point of view. But all of that work should lead to you going, I don't know, we'll see. And so that's the paradox, is like, I know so much and I know enough to know, I don't know.
Right. But what happens through the practice and getting to that point of loving that I don't know is developing the faith in the process. That a true craftsman has to develop the faith that I don't know, but I know what to do. And if I do that, something compelling and interesting is going to happen. I have faith in that. So I'm not going to let it shut me down. I'll just do that.
And as a younger actor, before I was well trained and before I learned any of these principles that I now know to be helpful and true and lead typically to in the moment spontaneous acting that doesn't really feel like acting all the time, that feels more like life. I remember before I learned any of that stuff, my whole thing was, how many lines do I have and how do I say these? And I think an actor listening now is probably, who maybe is in that same boat where they're a younger actor or something and going, what do they mean by, I know what to do, but I don't know what to do? Like, what do I do? You know, and it's like, what would you say to that person who's going?
Well, first of all, it doesn't matter how many lines you have, because we could talk at length about the Meisner mindset that it's about your behavior. It's not the lines anyway. The lines are not our job. And, you know, the playwright has done that already. We don't have to do anything but that. Or as I say, any idiot can stand up on the stage and say lines in a particular order. That's not acting. It's a completely different thing. But I think that the challenge is to communicate to young actors, and it can be a problem with some of the folks that are teaching as well. You're not teaching performance. You really, when I teach the Meisner technique, I'm teaching you how to rehearse. And that's what Sandy believed. He was teaching you how to rehearse. The performance will happen when the performance happens.
And how would you define rehearsal in that sense?
Just exploring. Exploring.
You're training an actor how to explore. Is it not only the text, but it's the things that have nothing to do with the text, like your own inner instincts, your imagination? What would you say?
Well, it certainly has to do with your imagination. It has to do with your suggestibility. You know, how suggestible are you? From the director, what does the director suggest to you? What does the given circumstances or the play suggest to you? And the most important, what are you suggesting to yourself?
Exactly. Absolutely.
What are you suggesting? How are you talking to yourself in terms of the meaning of these moments? And the challenge that I see so many young actors have, not just young actors have, I don't want to appear ageist, so many actors have, is that they're so focused on getting it right. I got to get it right, you know? And that just freezes you up. Get what right? What is it you're trying to get right? First of all, there is no wrong. So you couldn't possibly not get it right. But you just have to let go of the idea of what you think it's supposed to be and let it be in the moment. Then all kinds of discoveries can be made, you know? I mean, the main foundational work that we start with the Meisner technique is the simple repetition exercise. But I see young actors all the time who get in their mind get in their head. Some moment will come at them from the other actor, and the instrument is responding. Sometimes even their facial expression is responding. The body is responding. It will get tense or something because of the moment that's coming from them, from the other actor. But then I can see in their eyes and in their head, they're trying to figure out, what do they mean by that? What did they mean when they said that? What was the tone? Because I have to understand what they mean by that before I know what my appropriate response is. What's the appropriate response? That's what society does to us. The shoulds and the oughts and the self-editing that we do all the time. You know, that's the hardest thing I think for an actor to learn when they're studying and working on their craft, is to turn that editor off and realize there's no place for that editor in the work. You know, being a lady or being a gentleman is never going to make you a better actor. That's great when we go get coffee and when we're friendly out here, but when we're working, you gotta let it go. And so what if you misinterpret what's coming at you? Their response will tell you if you're right or wrong, and what a gift is that? That's the next moment.
And it's training people to be an adjustment to what is across from them.
Yeah.
To respond to what's happening.
Yeah.
Because we're doing that in life all the time. I think that was one of the things that clicked for me about the foundation of truthful acting is the reality of doing. Mm-hmm. And so then I think the mind, if you haven't really connected that, and for me, this is what it was like, okay, so be real then. All of a sudden, I'm now back in that should. Look natural. Okay, so that's what acting is. I'm going to say the line in the naturalistic way. What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means making it sound like a conversation.
Yeah, we want it to be more conversational. What does that mean?
It means it's boring is what it means to me.
100%.
I don't go to the theater to see a conversation.
Right. No.
I see conversations all the time.
No.
I don't want a conversation. It's not our job to do conversational.
If what I'm doing in the scene, what the character's doing in the scene, what I'm doing in the scene is I'm trying to convince you that I am telling the truth.
Right.
If I can tell based on your behavior while I'm giving you my explanation and why I'm persuading you about something that I've done or dissuading you away from something I didn't do, and you're looking at me skeptically, it should be affecting me.
Should be.
It should be. That's the reality of doing. I'm really responding to you even while I'm talking. And if you go, okay, you get it? You see what I'm saying? And then it's like, okay, yeah. But if you don't, I have to respond to that.
But if the other actor, or if the actor has not developed their consciousness or attention to the fact that they're noticing those things, they're noticing that my behavior is skeptical. They're too busy doing what they do. I've made a decision about what this is going to be, and this is like a cement block. And by God, I'm going to show you this cement block. And I don't care what you do. Everything that I'm doing is to prove that this cement block that I have made the decision outside of the rehearsal or the performance has meaning. Everything is about that. And in the meantime, there's all this stuff going on that they're missing because they're so busy with this block. Then the audience, whether it's on film or whether it's in a theater, is going, something's not right. Something's not jiving here. Why am I seeing this skepticism and they're not? You know?
Yes.
And then the witnesses to the event, I don't like the word audience because it puts pressure on us. That when we're working, whether it's in class or on stage or even on camera, the witnesses of the event will disconnect and start thinking about, where am I going to go for dinner? I need to stop and get milk on the way home. You know, that's where their mind goes when they see two actors disconnect from each other.
It's so true. And that's why that word instinct is so important when you're training, because we all have an instinct for human behavior. We all have an instinct for it. You walk into a room, a couple's just been fighting, and you go, oh, something's off. You don't talk about it maybe, but you go, everybody's good?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I brought this thing. No, everything's great.
Yeah.
It's great. So did you guys get here okay? Like what? And you're just going, something is, we don't have to be experts in acting, but it's getting us back, like you said, to that foundational, as kids, we're just responding.
And all you do, the funny thing is, you don't even have to do anything with it. All you have to do is notice it. Okay, I've noticed that there's tension in the room. What am I going to do with it? Don't do anything with it. Just notice it and respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what is, like you said, when people are there watching, witnessing, they're all like, they're taking everything in because they don't have a cement block putting pressure on themselves to say, I have to respond to this in a certain way. No one's watching you. They're watching the action on stage.
Right.
But that, like you said, the actor has to be open and sensitive enough to be an adjustment to whatever is going on within the situation. And a lot of times that's the life across from them. And if you can't do that, you kind of lose everything.
We have to remember that as simple as that sounds, it's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, again and again, I say, get in a class where you can practice this.
Mm-hmm.
Because as simple as us explaining it to somebody, just be present, just be a person, just listen, just respond, don't have the cement block, all the things that we can tell them that intellectually sounds really simple, it's really hard to do because we have this incredible habit that we have been taught since we were kindergartners to think before you speak and be nice and be polite and all the things that freezes us up.
Mm-hmm.
And break, like any kind of habit, it's really hard to break, and it can only be broken with practice. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is what's so incredibly brilliant about Sandy Meisner's work, is that he's given us these series of exercises that are built to specifically do that. We should talk about conflict.
Go. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Well, it comes up into my mind because we're talking about how hard it is to turn that editor off. And that editor, that polite person, that great member of society wants to resolve conflict at all costs. And so you see actors in training who will get to the point where they're beginning to make these breakthroughs, and then there's conflict that comes up between the two actors in repetition and the exercise, and then they just want to deflect it and make it go away. And what we have to realize is, as actors, it's our job to learn to stand in that conflict and let that conflict be there without deflecting it or resolving it. Otherwise, there is no drama. Every good drama has conflict. And if there's no conflict, there's no story. So if our job is to tell the story, to live the story behaviorally, then if we're constantly resolving the conflict, then we're undermining the story constantly. You know, and it's a simple thing that actors do that will resolve conflict or get really tense, and then they'll go, just a sigh. That's like, okay, I'm done with this now. I'm going to release all this conflict. And what the story needs is the lights to go down in the midst of that conflict, not to resolve it. That is really hard for some people to understand and to learn. The comfort with conflict is part of the job. Part of the job.
Yeah, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you go back to, and like David Mamet, for instance, the simplified definition of drama that I always kind of come back to is his, and there's different definitions. It's not just the only one, but when he said it's a hero's journey of overcoming obstacles to achieve a specific goal. And a lot of his training in acting too is from same principles, right? Meisner and Boleslavsky and these people, and that obviously had to have had an effect on his writing. And when we say, even zooming out further and just observing life, not even some playwright or some acting teacher or actor, and you just say, well, the nature of change is through conflict. I mean, that's how things change. I mean, even zooming back to the Greeks, and it's like, I have an idea, I have a belief. Well, here's its opposite, and now they clash, and then a new one is born, and that's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and so on.
Right.
And we look at history, we just see that. We see it, right? And look at it in competition. Again, a sports analogy. But it's this team versus this team, and they come together, and we see who wins. And there's only one outcome. It's same in a courtroom. It's like, here's the argument, here's its opposite, and the jury or the judge decide this is the verdict.
Right.
This is it. And they might get it wrong, but that's what happens. And I think for us as actors, we have to look at life and go, okay, that's true. Look at story. Okay, that is true. And that right there, to me, that bolstered the argument for me, where it was like, well, yeah, it's not about just screaming at each other either. It's about really dealing with the conflict.
Well, just from the standpoint of simple physics, you're a bunch of atoms that are vibrating in a particular way, and I'm a bunch of atoms that are vibrating in a particular way. And if we just notice that and stand opposite each other, there's conflict. We don't have to make conflict. It's there on a molecular level all the time. Again, it's about developing the trust in the simplicity of it. You know? If I put my attention on you and decide, I'm just going to be completely fascinated with everything that's going on, and I'm going to be fascinated with everything that's going on with this person over here. And in the midst of that fascination, I can have opinions about it. I may like it, or I may not like it. Whichever one opinion that I'm having about it, I'm going to express. Maybe with words, maybe with behavior, but just have it. And that series of moment-to-moment responses that's happening between the two people, because we were talking about just vibrating molecules, if this is happening, it changes the molecules of the air in the room. And that's why really fine, connected, moment-to-moment acting changes the air in the room. That makes people lean forward and go, I don't know what the hell is going on, but I don't want to miss a second of it. Mm-hmm. You know? But it's through the practice of learning that faith that's going to happen if we just let it happen. Stay out of the way. Simply do the thing you need to do, which is put the attention on the other person and respond at what's coming at you. Mm-hmm. Now, there's always the question that comes up about, well, what do you do if you're working on a play, or what if you're doing if you're working on something that has a given circumstances? And I keep hitting the damn microphone.
You're good. You're good.
I didn't realize I gestured so much. Through the rehearsal process, you have to build, let's say, a sandbox. Sometimes I say a boxing ring. Mm. Through the rehearsal process and bringing the given circumstances to this moment-to-moment work that we're always working on and hungry for all the time, that sandbox gets smaller and smaller, and we build a framework. Mm. And once we get that framework, then you and I both know we're free to do whatever we need to do in the moment and have the responses that we're having, as long as we stay within this framework.
Because if it's not living truthfully under these circumstances. It's living truthfully under some other imaginary circumstances.
Right. And not to mention, you know, at some point, if we're staging a play or even staging, doing a film, I need you to be here at this point because of the camera, or I need you to move over here at this point because of the staging, that actor needs to be there where you were before. These are things that are logistical about the business that we're in. So that's the kind of framework that I'm talking about that comes out of the rehearsal process, right? I know that I need to be here. What's my job as an actor? I got to find a way to motivate it.
Not just go there because it said so, right? Like going back to, it's not saying lines.
Right.
I'm not just saying the lines in a certain order.
Right. I'm thinking about that moment that blew you away that Joey did in True West about the cork of the bottle. Mm-hmm. Did I ever tell you the backstory of that?
No.
I never told you the backstory.
No, set it up too. Set it up a little bit.
So I had recently, this past summer, directed a production of True West. And with two actors that I had trained, it was glorious to be working with actors that not only trained with me and that I trusted, but trusted me and had this great chemistry, and they knew the Meisner work, and it was really, really great. Well, there was this point where one of the actors was really drunk and carrying a whiskey bottle around, and he took the cork off the whiskey bottle and he set it down on the counter, and it rolled off the floor and rolled off and fell on the floor. And as the director, my immediately response watching it was, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Everybody's going to be paying attention to the cork. Just pick it up, pick it up. But he didn't. He went on with the scene and everything like that and moved. And then he came back, and then he went to bend over to pick it up. And then as he went to pick it up, he realized that he was too drunk. Well, this is what he was playing. He was too drunk that if he bent over anymore, he was going to fall down. So he made the decision to sit on the floor before he picked up the thing. I was blown away. As were you. You told me afterwards. Mm-hmm. Blown away by his being in the moment and playing that impediment of the alcohol so beautifully, and it just said so much about the character. It just was. So afterwards, I said to him, Joey, it was fucking brilliant. You're being in the moment and doing that, and it was brilliant. And he's got this little smirk on his face, and I said, what are you smiling at? And he said, oh, that was completely planned. And I said, what? And he said, I knew you wanted me to sit on the floor right after that with my back against the cabinet, and I was having trouble justifying why I would sit. Mm. So through the next performances that I had not been at, he was continuing to explore and finding the way to justify the sitting on the floor, where I needed him to be to make the pretty director picture that I wanted. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he was, even still, that it didn't happen in the moment, it felt like it did. Mm-hmm. You know, so I said, well, I take a little bit of the brilliance back. But still, it was amazing. But that's a perfect example of continuing to do the work.
Exactly. There's a thing that I talk about a lot, and it's having like a translator. Sometimes if you're taking this same idea and putting it into the film context, right? There are things that you'll hear from a director, and they might come over and say, talk faster. Just do it faster. And immediately, if you're trying to find the truth of the moment, you're going, what? Like, you just want me to say the lines faster? But if there's no time to kind of ask why, you have to find a reason to, like you said, justify that. And sometimes it's as simple as like, I really have to go to the bathroom or whatever. But like, it could also be a million different things in the urgency of the situation, or the person someone just called you and they're like outside waiting for you, and you're like, I need to tell you this really fast, you know, and then that's the behavior of it.
We're dealing with just the opposite of that with a young actor in our middle school musical right now, and the fact that he talks so fast that you can't understand him. Mm. And I said to him, when you're giving your lines right now, it's like you're running. I want you to imagine that you're walking really slow when you're saying your lines, so that every word is like a step that you're taking. And it changed it like that.
Mm. He just needed...
Well, he needed a justification for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. An imagery that he could understand.
And this goes back to what you said about suggestibility. It would be great if we were working with directors all the time that had the same ideals or maybe even the same language, but we don't. We work with all types of directors and from all types of backgrounds with all different ways of working. And sometimes the suggestion, like you said, the most important one has to come from yourself, and it'll justify maybe the director's note, or it'll justify something new about that take or that moment but is that what you mean when you say you have to find a way to be suggestible and to suggest things that are motivating or justifying?
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I mean. I mean, as a director, I want actors who are suggestible, not only to suggestions that are coming from me, suggestions I may give them, but who are suggestible to themselves, so that if I say to them about a particular moment that we're rehearsing or an approach that they're taking, this is not working. You know, it's not working. We need to find something else, another approach. I don't want an actor who's going to say to me, tell me what you want me to do. No. It's not my job to tell you what to do. I just need something else. So an actor needs to be suggestible and have enough self-confidence and have enough craft and technique that they can go, no problem, I got something else for you. And if that doesn't work, I'll have another one. And if that doesn't work, I'll have another one.
If you have a robust imagination, and if you know yourself well enough, there is an infinite amount of things you could do to adjust
Absolutely.
anything. And that's that. I literally just had this conversation with my former teacher yesterday, and we were talking about. He said, because his teacher Bob Carnegie was telling him, you have to learn to direct yourself in a way, and he was like, as a young actor in class, what do you mean by that? And then he was inevitably telling me the same thing as a student in his class, because I had this great day where I got to work where that guy, my teacher, directed me in a scene on film, and then that same day I went to Harlem and I shot an episode on this web series, and I remember the two different directorial approaches. The first one, obviously, is my acting teacher, and the way in which he directed me was it's pretty simple. And he was like, get him to stay with how you read this letter to him. And the irony was it was a scene where I was playing Bill Alderson and it was Sanford Meisner was the character. So it was like this really kind of meta moment, like principles within principles. It was so crazy. But then when I shot this other thing, it was a totally different thing. It was more so say that line a different way and would give like a line reading adjustment or like this would be funny or whatever. And I remember thinking, gosh, these are two so different things. And then when I shared that story, he had said, you have to find a way to direct yourself. And Bob told me the same thing. And it's that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. I usually say,
what do you say?
I usually say, you need to learn to be, I want you to learn to be director proof.
Yeah. You do.
That you can be in the worst movie or the worst play that anyone has ever seen, but they will say, but that guy.
And part of this conversation that happened yesterday too was this thought, which I would love to get your thoughts on, which is as you're training people to understand not only the theory behind what Meisner's principles were, but of course the application. You have to be able to do it, right? It's like reading a book on swimming.
Right.
And you're like, I want to win a gold medal. It's like, get in the pool. At some point, you got to get in, you got to learn and do it. And I said, it's kind of like you're training them on two tracks at the same time. On one track, it's the principles, and you have to learn that, right? And on the other track, and this is, I think, what all teachers do, they find a way, if they get to teach, to create the environment of the class or the curriculum that they wish they had in some way, or they're modifying or improving it.
Yeah.
And I said, a lot of times in classes, it's we do the work, and then the immediate thing once the scene is done is turn and look and go, what'd you think? Was it good or not? And it's like, you can't train yourself to do that because you have to know if it's good or not.
What do you say when a student does that?
I don't tell them I don't say good or bad. I say, how'd that feel, or what was that experience of that?
That's what I do too. What do you think?
Yeah.
How did it feel for you? Because that's the most important thing.
It is.
How do you feel? Because there's only one person that can judge if you were fully in the moment and you were fully emotionally honest, and if you were fully present and you were doing the work. There's only one person that can hold you accountable, and that is you.
Yes. It's like Joey, you thought that just happened, and he was like, well, I set that up.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was trying to find a way to make them both work.
Right.
And even you, so close to the play, directing the play, knowing him, teaching him, all those things are going, well, that surprised me. And that's the key. You have to find a way to have that ability to go, I know that director doesn't know what he's talking about right now. He thinks I'm good. It's not good.
Right.
Or like, I can take what he's saying or she's saying, and I can process that, and I can say, okay, I can serve that note, but whatever I do, I'm not going to be in my head.
Right.
So I'm just going to be over here. I'm going to really do the thing, or I'm going to come at it in a different way. I'm going to do it this way or whatever.
But that's the joy of it for me. As a director, a teacher, and an actor. I mean, if we even talk about Wayward Ken and me being able to see the dailies from my work in Wayward Ken, I mean, you've been incredibly gracious with the compliments that you gave me about the work. But I would see the work and I watch the work and I'm like, that could have been better. there's so much more I could have done there. If I had just relaxed, or if I had just done this, or if I had shifted the approach just a little bit. And I don't think that's just the director in me looking at it. I think that's the actor in me holding myself accountable, going, yeah, but, I on some level, I understand actors who say they never want to see their work. They never want to watch their work because they think they will judge it. But I want to, because I want to know how to get better,
That was my teacher's, after not every single time we worked, but that was the question he asked most often when we were pretty far into the work. It was a 2-year program, and so it was like maybe in the second year, and working on scenes on one of the days and technique on the other day. And after scenes and stuff, it would be, okay, so what if anything could be made better? What if anything could you improve upon? And it was a great question to be asking, because like you said at the beginning of this conversation, it was, you should always be growing.
Yeah.
Until you're gone, you're going to be developing and growing in some direction.
What's the point?
It's not, to just be like, I know it all. There's no such thing. But also, that's so boring, like you said. It's not. I want to know what is going. I want us to both be like, we don't know what's going to happen. Which I think that was so fun about us working together on that movie.
Yeah.
Was like, we knew this. We knew the script. We knew the circumstances. We talked about the character. We knew, and we had set that up for a long time. But then now we're here, so let's just see.
Yeah.
And I think it was great to have a lot of actors in the room. I think all of them that were open to the discovery of the moment.
Right.
And so how fun is that? And that's what made editing it difficult, because it was like, oh man, there's every take's fun and great, and there's an endless amount of possibilities, choices, and meaning. Yeah. But it's not even in this self-deprecating way where you look at it, because I'm doing the same thing with my own work in the movie, where I'm like, yeah, whatever, I could have done, and it is what it is at that point, it's over. But same thing. What, if anything, could have been? And that was part of how my teacher not only taught me, but trained me to think of the work. Not just, do you approve or do you disapprove? Because you have no confidence.
Right.
You can't really offer anything of value to a director, because they actually want you to go, this is how I honestly feel.
Right.
Because sometimes they don't know. Like you said, something's not working. I don't know what it is. Let's open it up. If you have an actor that doesn't know, okay, you're in this moment, you're useless to me. What about you?
Right.
And there's this story that a buddy, Julio, he shot that Sicario film. He was in a scene with Benicio del Toro. He just shared this story, and that director Denis Villeneuve was there, and there was a scene where Benicio, he's got his weapon, and they're sitting there, and it's a really tense scene, and he's like, before we do this other take, can you just put your rifle on the table? And he said, no. And he was like, what? He's like, Benicio, just for this take, when you say that line, just put the rifle on the table. And he was like, no. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I would never surrender my weapon. I would never. In this situation, I would never do that. And he was like, okay, but can we just try it? He was like, yeah, we can do it. So he does it through the scene, everything. And he watches it and he's like, oh yeah, well, that was terrible. What was I thinking? But it's not that like, that's an actor fighting the director and saying, I planned it. I want it to go this way. It's an actor following the instinct of the character saying, I'm here to be a safeguard for the truth. Within the framework we establish,
right.
I'm not doing that. It just doesn't make, you need to convince me more, because it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And it's not.
I can't justify that.
It can't do it.
Right.
And therefore the truth goes right out of the room if I just do what you say. And that's something that actors, young actors especially, when they're just learning and they don't have experience, they're going, well, I want to please the director. It's like, you need to be an artist. You need to have a point of view. You need to have confidence in the part. You need to do what you're doing with reality.
Opinion, point of view, actor's faith that you know what to do in any situation and then it's all going to be fine. Ultimately, what I want to be able to say to a student that has studied with me for a while is, okay, I've gone with you as far as I can go. What you're looking for is that way. Mm-hmm. You got to keep going.
We had a school that was it was just another school. I didn't go there, and in our program that Jim was teaching at, it was a 2-year private program, offshoot of Playhouse West in New York, and I think I told you this, but at the beginning of the second year, he said, "Everybody, open up your journals and write this letter." He said, "Jim and Andrea were the teachers. Jim and Andrea. Frankly, and with all due respect," and we all wrote this, "I don't need you anymore." And he said, "I want you to sign that letter with your actions over the course of the second year. And frankly, I don't want to see you anymore." And he's like, "I love you guys, but frankly, you better be ready to not need me anymore." Like you've said, they didn't believe in not ever developing again, but that you can say, "I've got this. I'm self-sufficient in the sense that I can do my job, and I can have that point of view, and I can access my actor's faith, and I can rely on these things."
Well, this sort of goes back to you inferred something in the beginning of our talk, and I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but the inference that I got was that whole idea of you were talking about how we as teachers sort of develop our own technique. Even though we started with something, we develop our own technique of it. Well, I think actors are the same thing. I mean, I think studying the Meisner technique gives you a great foundation. It gets you a great beginning, but ultimately, a really successful craftsman is going to develop their own technique. They're going to take these little pieces from this toolbox that is the Meisner technique, filtered through us as teachers, but ultimately they're going to take it, and further down the road, what they're doing is going to be their way. And that's the way it should be.
Isn't that what Meisner said too? Yeah. Technique is a means to an end.
Right.
And you should ultimately train to the point where no one really approaches it the exact same way you do.
Right.
And think about the infinitesimal choices and combinations of things on any given moment on set within the framework of this particular project. Every single one is different. Mm-hmm. Every single one is going to require something just a little different from you in your instinctual choices, in terms of how you relate yourself to the part or whatever you're doing in your preparation. But ultimately, every moment has a meaning all its own.
Yeah.
So what? It's not a carbon copy. It's not math. It's not science. It's not a formula. It's art.
Right.
And we have to find a way to train ourselves to be there on a consistent basis.
Right.
And if you can find a way to do that, it's a gift.
That's the journey. And you're right. It is a gift.
How would you quantify the value of your training as an actor? Can you? How would you measure it?
Well, it's really my life. I mean, finding my way to acting in general, and then finding my way to Freddie Karaman, and then Wynn Handman, and then the brief time that I was able to study with Sandy. That's my life. I don't know what my life would be had I not found that and been given that path and those gifts. You know, I would thank every one of them individually. Thank you for my life. Because the life that I have built has been driven by my passion for that journey. You know?
And the other word that you used at the top of it was an insatiable curiosity. Mm-hmm. That led you to those places.
Yeah. From
small town Alabama, New York, Fred, Wynn, and on. And
the surprise of it all was the realization that deep in me, out of this experience grew this deep desire to share the work with others. I didn't expect that. I expected to be there doing this as a means to an end for myself and my own path as an actor. And to be honest with you, ultimately, my personal path as an actor was put in the back seat because the teaching and the directing and became first in front of it. I wasn't willing to give that up. It became too important, and it's still the most important thing to me. The opportunity to share the work with others.
Well, you speaking about the meaning of that for you. I mean, it's hard to put a price on it. You can't, and that's what's amazing about the gift of giving back.
Right.
Is that you get to be on the other side of that meaning for someone else who's coming in with maybe the same curiosity, a lot of questions, maybe a lot of fear, and you're saying, I'm here, and this is the moment that changed me, and that introduced me to so many things that have, and for me, I look at it like the gift that keeps on giving. And so it's like, there's so much to give.
And I've been fortunate enough to see many of my students go on to be directors and teachers. And that is incredibly moving for me, because not only did they get the passion for the technique and the work out of it, but somehow or another, they discovered in them as well the desire to share the power of their work with other people. You know?
Yeah.
That's very moving.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, this has been so great. And
it always is.
Always. If you want, you can look into this camera and just tell people where they can find you.
Okay. My website is Terry Martin Act, just ACT at .net, terrymartinact.net, or my email is terrymartinact@gmail.com. You can always find information about what's going on with me and my classes, private coaching, on that website. I've got an ongoing class that I'm teaching through WaterTower Theatre. You can find that at watertowertheatre.org, or again on my website. And I'm putting together a really exciting retreat intensive in Santa Fe this summer in July. So if you want more information about that, reach out about that as well.
Awesome. Well, Terry, thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for listening. This is In the Moment with Adam Lowder, episode 10. Like and subscribe if you haven't already done so on all our platforms. Thank you for spending time with us. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, bud.
This is great. As always.